Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. A couple of years ago, I planted a whole new batch of roses to complement the old roses that I had here in the cottage garden, and I chose all of them so that they would continue the flowering as long as possible, with the goal of trying to have roses flowering at Christmas. Well, don't know about Christmas, but certainly they're still flowering well. And the key to keep that flowering going is to deadhead. Just as soon as the petals fade, before they can form seeds, just cut back to a leaf, and that will encourage the young buds that are there to open out and flower. Because remember, all these really want to do is make seeds to make new plants. However, there are some where you don't want a deadhead at all. Now, look at this. This is Rosa rugosa alba. The alba refers to the white flowers, which look fantastic in late May through to early July. But I stopped deadheading this towards the end of June because I want the rose hips, the fruits, to develop. And you can see here are the fruit, looking like little tomatoes. And if you take one off and open it up, you'll find that inside it's full of seeds. But of course, they look so decorative. And there are plenty of roses, actually, that do have really good hips. You have Rosa moysii that I've got in the grass borders with bottle-shaped hips. I've got complicata here in the cottage garden, which has a mass of hips looking like berries. Lots of different types of hips, all really decorative. So if you know that the rose hips are good, don't deadhead, give them a chance. But most roses are grown for their flowers. So deadhead assiduously, keep the flowers going, and see how long they can last. Now, coming up on today's programme, it's the perfect time to plan next year's borders. Carol finds inspiration from a beautiful garden.
I've come to RHS Rosemoor in Devon. I want to find out how, by combining all sorts of plants, grasses, bulbs, perennials, annuals, shrubs and trees, they create all sorts of beautiful borders.
I think most of us would agree that urban planting is not always very inspired. But we visit a project in Manchester with some creative ideas to change that.
This area in particular is one of our biggest hives of activity for wildlife. The bumblebees, solitary bees, lacewings, lots of cool stuff in here. Dragonflies, we get everything you can imagine down here.
Gertrude Jekyll is one of the most influential 20th century British garden designers, and Advolly is visiting one of her finest surviving creations.
To walk through a Jekyll garden in June is to step into a slice of heaven.
And if you're looking for ideas to extend the interest of your autumn garden, we visit one that is packed with autumnal colour.
It's a full head of flowers, so each stem has a great mass of flowers. Look at that one, for example. It's just a great wodge on the top of here.
Now, there have been big changes here because this used to be the copse, which I planted about 28, 29 years ago to create a hazel copse with primroses and bluebells and wood anemones, and it was lovely. But over the last 10 years, two things have happened. The first is the trees have got much bigger. That means they're casting a much deeper shade and sucking up much more water. And the second thing is, of course, the climate is changing. We're getting these very dry springs and dry summers. So the ground got completely dry and barren. As a result, there were no primroses growing underneath, no bluebells to speak of. So I made a decision. We grubbed out all but one of the hazels. And you can see now I have a big open space and I want to make a new woodland garden. The first stage when you're doing that is to establish the mid layer, the shrub layer. I've got 3 shrubs here. all different, but all suited to woodland. The first is this magnolia. It's Magnolia stellata, which has these star-shaped bursts of white flowers, usually quite early. Now, you can see, looking at this, is the leaves are brown. That is actually burnt by sun. But don't be put off by that. I think one of the things you'll find if you go shopping for shrubs now is that many might be discounted, either because of the way they look or because it's been too warm or dry. It's a great time to buy and plant. So this flowers in March and April. And the real issue when you're planting any magnolia is late frosts can really damage the flowers. So I need to protect it from morning sun. Now, the biggest protection will be back here. And the reason why morning sun is the problem is that when they thaw too fast. It's not the freezing that does the damage, it's the thawing. If they get the early morning light, that thaws them very fast, the cells collapse, the flowers turn brown, and it looks terrible. Now this is an Amelanchier lamarckii. Beautiful white flowers in spring, and then in autumn, the foliage turns a really good deep red colour. Now this can either be kept as a shrub, or it will grow into a small tree. Amelanchiers will reach about 5-6 metres tall. I won't let it do that. I want it as a multi-stemmed shrub to look through. But first of all, we've got to plant it and find a position for it. How about that? And then just checking it that way. Good. Now the third one. This is Viburnum opulus, the Guelder rose. Very common, very robust, absolutely perfect because you have these white flowers in spring and summer, followed by intense red berries that the birds love. All these shrubs, by the way, will cope with full sun and quite a lot of shade. So they're completely happy in the half shade of deciduous woodland. And just remember, it's deciduous. If you've got lots of pines and ferns, these are not going to thrive because it's too dark all year round. If you're planning to plant any trees, shrubs or hedges, basically any woody plants, if you get them in before Christmas, the roots have a chance to establish before the demands of a dry spring and summer. Now, when you're planting any tree or shrub, plant it, if anything, slightly proud of the surface of the soil. Now, what I'm going to do is water that hole now before I backfill. That will be an incentive, if you like, for the roots to go down looking for water. If your soil is as dry as mine, then you will find that however much it rains, it's going to take months to get down into the area where you want the roots to go. Right, you can start to fill in around that. I haven't added any goodness either below or around it. I don't want the plant to sit in a planting hole. I want it to get its roots out into the soil as it is, and that way it will get more established. Let's heel it in like this. Right, a little bit more water. Finally, I'm going to mulch it. And this is the shredded top growth of all the hazel material that we couldn't keep. And that will make a good mulch around it. Now, this is the beginning of something that's going to take time to develop. But this summer, Carol went to visit an established garden, displaying its late summer colours in all their glory.
I've come to RHS Rosemoor in Devon. With acres and acres of beautiful gardens, plants and borders, this place is a gardener's dream, and I'm here to delve deeper. I want to find out how, by combining all sorts of plants, grasses, bulbs, perennials, annuals, shrubs and trees, they create all sorts of beautiful borders. And in particular, I want to find out how that planting can create different moods. This is the cool garden. It's tranquil and serene. And the mood is established by the water that runs right the way through it. But then that mood is emphasised by the planting. The planting throughout this garden is soft and relaxed. And this is as close to a punctuation mark as you get. At first I thought it was box. It's not. It's a variegated pittosporum, and it's used all around the garden to mark the ends of some of these beds. But your attention straight away is drawn to this. It's a salvia, Yangii. It will die right down in the winter and it'll probably be cut hard back, then it'll spring up again. The flowers themselves are the most soft lavender, so you get this almost cloudy effect. And the softness of this salvia is emphasised by its contrast with the lovely grass, Panicum virgatum, very appropriate for today, called North Wind. While this Molinia is already in flower, and these inflorescences just move gently, wafting backwards and forwards in the breeze. Of course, it isn't just about creating a mood. Plants of different shapes and sizes can be used in a border to create layers, height, colour and texture. This agapanthus, with its gorgeous deep purple petals, adds a shot of colour and contrasts beautifully with a soft, white, delicate buddleia. Grasses add texture and movement, and this veronicastrum adds a light and airy touch as it reaches for the sky. They all play a role in making a glorious and exciting border. You look around the garden and many of the same plants are repeated here and there, but they're all put together in slightly different combinations, which proves that even in a small place with a limited palette of plants, you can make glorious pictures. No prizes for guessing where we are now. This is the hot garden. It could not be more different from the cool garden. Everything here is sizzling, glowing. This glorious selenium is Sahin's early flower, and it's surely got every fiery colour imaginable within its petals. Although it's at its absolute zenith at the moment, if these flowers are dead-headed and each of these stems is taken down so that these new buds can then open, the show will just go on and on for months and months. In the cool garden, everything was soft and got on brilliantly well with its neighbours. But here, there's a real competition. Just look at this coreopsis with these brilliant golden suns. Each one is facing upwards, and it really is one of the brightest things I've ever seen. Behind the coreopsis, a little quieter but still glowing, this beautiful dahlia is called Moonfire. Different forms and shapes galore, but all contributing to the intensity of the sultry mood. The hot garden is at its peak at this time of year. Certain plant families also are really shining forth One of them is the crocosmias. This has to be my favourite. I yearn for this plant. I've lost it in my own garden and I want it back. It's called Star of the East and it's got a far, far bigger flower than any of the other crocosmias. If you want your crocosmias to maintain their brilliant performance, then every couple of years, wait till the leaves have subsided, dig up the whole clump. You'll find a series of corms, one on top of the other, and it's the top one which is really going to give you the best flower. So replant, having enriched the area they're going into with some really good compost or other organic matter, and that way they should reward you with a fine show for the next couple of years. These are the magnificent long borders, 150 metres of them. So you might think straight away, well, that's not really appropriate to my garden. But not a bit of it, because it's divided into sections by using these yew sentinels. So each one makes an almost separate garden, and every one has got its own atmosphere. But here a reference to the cool garden with this glorious agapanthus, but used in an entirely different way. Here it's combined with this lovely soft yellow crocosmia. It's called Colleton Fishacre, named after another Devon garden. And yet there are references too to the hot garden with these glowing orange and russet coloured dahlias. This one is called Copper Boy, and this great big shaggy flowered one at the back is called Autumn Orange. And the whole thing is made all the more dramatic by this background of the dark crimson eupatorium. In this border, the Echinops is adding architecture and structure. The cool blue offers a perfect backdrop to the white of Galtonia candy cans. We usually associate bulbs with spring, but this is flourishing midsummer, and once established, will self-seed. Any mixed border should have a range of herbaceous plants, annuals, shrubs and bulbs to create different moods and atmospheres and provide interest over a long period. Within reason, even a small tree can be used. Here, Sorbus rufopilosa is adding much needed height as it stands proud above the planting that surrounds it. We all love our gardens, and as they show here at Rosemoor, with planning, thought and the willingness to experiment, we can all combine plants together to create a space which is truly atmospheric.
The lesson I get from that is that you always need to edit colour in your garden. It doesn't matter if it's in a pot or in a border or wherever. And go to gardens like Rosemoor, see how they do it, get ideas, get inspiration, and that way you maximise the effect of whatever colour you use and whatever shade it might be. Every year, I take the tulips that I've grown in pots and then store them in crates, throwing away the tiniest ones and keeping the biggest ones. Now this year, quite a lot of big ones. And these are all destined for long grass. Anywhere where we can mingle them in with bulbs of all kinds to make what we call a tame flower meadow. I've said this before, but it is worth repeating. If you want any bulb to look natural in long grass, don't try placing. it won't work. Just throw them on the ground and plant them wherever they land. The second thing is, if you've got more than just a few, when you're planting into grass, i.e. into quite compacted soil, get yourself a bulb planter, and it works a treat. So all you have to do is make a hole, like that. That takes out a plug. Get your tulip, pointy end up, of course, pop it in the hole, and then make another hole next to the next one, and the plug will come out as you do so. So that can go into the first hole and cover it up and push it down. And actually, once you get in the swing of it, you can do a couple of hundred of these very quickly indeed. Now, remember, these are tulips that I've taken from the jewel garden. So we've got purples, we've got oranges, we've got frilly tulips, parrot tulips, we've got queen of night, which is almost black. And that mixture of border colours with the naturalness of the grass and the hedges and the spring light makes a brilliant contrast, and I love it. Tulips do much better if they're planted as deep as possible. And the perfect time to do this is the month of November. But don't worry if you can't do it till December. And the reason why you plant tulips later than most bulbs is because there is a fungus called tulip fire, which can rot the bulb. And the best way to avoid that is to put them in after some cold weather. Now, this summer, we went to Manchester to visit a project which is specifically reclaiming some of those slightly dull public spaces that no one seems to love very much, and imbuing them with real creativity and love.
So to set the scene, going back 10 years, so this used to be an old access route, an old loading bay, bin storage in one corner, but basically it was a really sort of an unloved, unused bit of the city.
We look after the gardens down here. We've got a small team with a bunch of volunteers. We also run workshops and just all about getting people involved really in the city centre garden.
I'm Andy from Plant Cooperative and I'm the project manager down here. Plant Cooperative started about 4 years ago. The estate that was managed here traditionally had a normal maintenance contract, so it was once a month. 2 people would arrive, they'd spray, mow, strim, those kind of things. But it was very much maintenance-heavy approach and very much low-maintenance approach.
I'm Liz and I'm head gardener. A lot of the initial stuff we did when we started was a lot of transformative. A lot of it was kind of very neglected, overgrown hedging that hadn't been maintained and was just not a good version of green space.
So even these standalone planters, they were with yew put in them. So just a single species hedge popped into standalone planters, which can be so much more. Our big problem with it is that, one, for biodiversity, not that great, it's quite limited, but also from a participation point of view. People can't get involved in a hedge.
So we sort of gradually over time adapted those areas, diversified the planting, which is a big one. And the more we've done that, the more it's become a garden. We know the benefits to well-being of gardening, and particularly in grey city spaces, that there's a lack of places for people to interact with. When we started in this area, there was a bit of nervousness around community gardening in, quite architectural space. So it's less wild than some of the other areas. And actually it's quite a diverse mix of plants, and there is a lot for people to still engage with.
The honeysuckle has gone berserk. Look at that. Like a waterfall, really cool. One of the things that we need to do is have seasonality. So whilst wildflower is amazing and we have lots of areas that are predominantly wildflower, we also need something that looks good all year round. So we need seasonal interest. And that is great from a visual point of view, but it's also really good for engagement as well, because it means you can be doing things all the way through the year. We don't want to have a period of time where after June, July, we go into sort of the end of summer and then we lose all of our volunteers because there's nothing for them to do. So we have lots of different volunteers come down, and I think the most rewarding thing for us is to be able to offer a career in horticulture, or at least a window into what people can be involved with. Really lacking in city centres is an opportunity to study horticulture or to do any sort of meaningful apprenticeship scheme.
I'm Rachel. I am the apprentice here. I have been since November, and I am on the RAG scheme, so Work and Retrain as a Gardener scheme. And I'm here 2 days a week, learning by doing, really. There we go.
Some of these grasses can probably be cut back now. They've started to come through as well, Gary.
Yeah.
Gary officially joined us almost a year ago.
About a year ago now. I used to be a toy shop manager. I spent 14 years doing toy retailer. But when I started doing this, I knew that I wanted to do something different. I knew I wanted to be outdoors, enjoying being in nature, which probably at the time I thought was quite difficult to do in Manchester. You know, the city centre doesn't really lend itself, but with Plant Cooperative and what we do, it does, it really does. It just shows you that with small spaces, you can bring nature into the city.
Sometimes people will ask me what plants are in this bed, and then when I say it's a type of thistle, they'll go, oh, okay. And I know some of them will dominate and take over, but we wanted to sort of take the approach of having a bit of control over that and just celebrating the thistle, basically, and all its wonderful goodness.
We don't garden for wildlife necessarily. It's just good gardening practice leads to an increase in wildlife. Ponds are a very important resource for any wildlife. If you're going to do one thing in a garden to encourage more wildlife, I'd say put a pond in. A fantastic food source for bats, for birds, for lots of other different insects as well. This is probably my favourite area in the gardens that we have here. We've got our ornamental planting that sort of runs up this side, then we blend into this really wonderful wildflower meadow. This area in particular is one of our biggest sort of hives of activity for wildlife, for bumblebees, but solitary bees, lacewings, lots of cool stuff in here. Dragonflies, we get everything you can imagine down here. Had this wonderful moment where somebody who was staunchly really sort of not against what we did, but maybe the messages hadn't quite come through, there was a little bit of confusion around it. I then saw this person doing a tour of the gardens, really sort of championing the work we do, and I overheard him say, oh, the nettles over there, don't worry about those, they're actually for the butterfly caterpillars, they're going to be eating them as a food source. I just thought, our work here is done. This is a really important thing because these people are the people who make decisions around how public space is managed. If you can get people who are the key decision makers to really care about wildlife, to really care about their duty and their responsibility to that wildlife, such as not using herbicides and pesticides, it makes a huge difference.
The green space itself has been here. It's the nature of it that's changed because it gradually becomes more unique and more biodiverse and more varied. And we're gradually taking away the sort of low maintenance planting and replacing that slowly with things that you wouldn't normally see in a city. And it's really exciting to be part of that gradual shift and be putting in things that, you know, I've never even seen before, let alone in a city centre. It's really exciting.
I love the way that project is driven by youthful energy. Just a desire to make something better. Now, my guess is that not many of you will have this fruit tree in your gardens. It's a medlar. And medlars are not terribly popular as a fruit, whereas in Victorian times and medieval times, they were very popular. And they're very curious because you pick them and they're hard, rather like quinces. And you store them, and they used to be stored in sawdust, and they blet. And that's a polite way, really, of saying they rot a little. And that ripening process softens the flesh. And the Victorians loved nothing better than to sort of scoop out the inside with a spoon, mix it up with a bit of cream and sugar, and eat it with huge relish, accompanied by a glass of good port. But even if that isn't your idea of a good pudding, you can make really good jelly from them, just as you would quince or crabapple jelly. But as a garden tree, they're wonderful, particularly for a small garden. They have wonderful blossom, remember the rose family, white flowers in spring, and if all that wasn't enough to make you rush out and plant a medlar, brilliant autumn colour. These will turn almost dark red before they fall. So, 3 cheers for the medlar. Good boy. Now, the vegetable garden is actually looking pretty good. September, October and November are sometimes the best time for vegetables. They've had all summer, our autumns are increasingly remaining mild, and it's a really good time to harvest and to enjoy the way it looks. However, there are very, very few seeds that are a good idea to sow as the days are getting shorter and colder. Broad beans, yes, and I've already done some of those, and maybe some peas. However, Japanese onion sets can be put into the ground in autumn, which will give you an earlier harvest next summer. Now, all onion sets are essentially just baby onions. Japanese onions tend not to be so big as European ones, but they come in many different shapes and sizes. There are lots of different varieties. This is a variety called Senchu. Very tasty but mild, and are completely hardy. This is the thing about them. They will take any amount of cold, snow and ice, and as long as there's reasonable drainage of rain as well. Now, like all sets, you push them into the soil, pointy end up, so that their tops are sticking out. Now, I'm going to put these about 6 inches apart. Onions are very sensitive to competition, and if you have them in rows or grids, it means you can hoe in between them. Now, if your ground is too wet, these can be placed in plugs. Put each set into an individual plug, bury it half the way up in the soil so the top half is sticking out, and then you can plant them out where you want them early spring. Now, I don't think it's a wild speculation to say that Gertrude Jekyll was not particularly interested in growing Japanese onions. However, she was one of the most influential figures in the world of horticulture in the 20th century. And Advolly has been to visit one of her masterpieces.
What is there to say about June, the time of perfect young summer, fulfilling the promise of the earlier months, and with no sign that its fresh young beauty will ever fade? The words of garden designer Gertrude Jekyll. And to walk through a Jekyll garden in June is to step into a slice of heaven. Jekyll was one of Britain's most influential garden designers, said to have changed the face of England. During her 60-year career, she worked on over 400 gardens at home and abroad. And this one at Heartland Abbey, tucked away in North Devon, is a fabulous example. Heartland Abbey was owned by a friend, Lady Stuckley. Gertrude would visit regularly, advising on plant choices, designs and structure. And the result is this stunning and very personal garden, which typifies Jekyll's style. Loose planting, full of colour and texture. Born in London in 1843 to wealthy parents, Gertrude Jekyll was educated in the style expected of a well-to-do girl: music, history and painting. When she was 4, Gertrude's family moved from London to Surrey, and here her love of nature grew as she climbed trees, played cricket, and according to her diary, did dangerous things with gunpowder. Her father called her his little oddity, as she tended not to follow the rules expected of nice Victorian girls. This independent streak drove her in later life. Her greatest love was painting, and at 17 she began her training at the South Kensington School of Art, where she was influenced by artists like Turner. She exhibited and sold her paintings at the Royal Academy, but sadly her failing eyesight meant that she could not continue with this passion, so she slowly turned to horticulture instead. But her time at art school would continue to influence her designs. She used plants in her borders like an artist uses paints upon canvas, from cool whites and blues to warm reds and oranges, merging everything together. This was a world away from the geometric carpet bedding that was popular at the time. Jekyll's planting was much more naturalistic. As well as the swathes of colourful flowers, she was also a huge fan of grey foliage. She wrote, in Walking Through a Garden, after passing some groups of gorgeous red and orange, it is an extraordinary relief to come to a place of tender colouring set in a ground of grey. This balance of exuberance and calm meant that her borders were always stunning, but never overwhelming. Jekyll travelled widely as a plant hunter, always on the lookout for something new. But plants which thrived on an Italian mountainside or an Algerian desert couldn't survive in the British climate. So she turned her attentions closer to home, scouring cottage gardens and old nurseries for new plants to introduce into her designs. Gertrude was a shrewd businesswoman, selling plants and seeds alongside her design work, and all the while writing dozens of best-selling books and thousands of articles on gardening. Despite her initial successes, during World War I, she faced financial ruin, as all over the country, flower beds were turned over to vegetables. But luckily, her fame had spread beyond Britain, and she was given a $10,000 donation by the Garden Club of America, which kept her afloat. Although Jekyll designed hundreds of gardens, unlike here at Hartland Abbey, she visited very few of them. The original remote worker. Instead, she would ask for soil samples to be sent to her home, including the building materials of the house and any particular flowers that the owners liked. She'd then draw up the plans and send them back. But Hartland Abbey is a little different because she visited regularly, and this is the area she had the most influence on. This bog garden really shows Jekyll's love of form and texture. Gunneras tower above you, creating a whole new world. Jekyll intentionally designed the paths to be winding and narrow, forcing you to interact with each leaf and stem. It's a garden not just to be looked at, but to be experienced on so many levels. Gertrude Jekyll was an extraordinary woman. As well as writing, plant hunting and designing, she was an early lover of photography, which she used to capture her garden designs. Her range of garden projects were vast, From estates covering hundreds of acres to one of her earliest commissions, a window box for a factory lad in Rochdale. But the sad truth is that many of Gertrude Jekyll's gardens have now been lost. Over time, most have adapted to changing styles. Even here at Hartland Abbey, the gardens were once overgrown and have now been sensitively restored. But her influence and philosophy still remains, a belief in beauty through working with nature rather than seeking to control it. As Jekyll said herself, the love of gardening is a seed once sown, never dies. And looking round these gardens today, you can still feel her presence in every rambling rose, lush border, winding path and garden room. Gertrude Jekyll's love of gardening is still blooming.
I visited a Jekyll garden last summer, which has been beautifully restored. And the weird thing is I remember going there as a child, and no one knew it was a Jekyll garden. It was completely different. And I remember playing there, and that odd connection that underneath the garden where I played as a child was this pristine and really significant garden. But however you come across them, Gertrude Jekyll shaped the way that we think about gardens, as well as our gardens look throughout the whole of the 20th century. Now, what I have here is a euonymus, but better known as a spindle. And what distinguishes it are these extraordinary pink fruits, which then split to reveal bright orange seeds inside. Birds love it, it's beautiful, and I think this would be a really good addition to my new woodland garden. And rather than buy a plant, I'm going to take cuttings from this now. At this time of year, we're on that cusp between semi-ripe cuttings and hardwood cuttings. But as a rule, if a deciduous plant has still got its leaves on, it's semi-ripe. That means it will strike quicker, but it'll need a little bit more assistance. And what you're looking for is new growth like this, a nice new stem without fruit or flowers. So we'll take that and immediately pop it in a bag. The reason why you put it in the bag is very simple. It's to reduce the rate of transpiration. And now it's just a question of going to the potting shed and potting them up. Because taking cuttings needs to be done quickly, it's a good idea to make sure you've got everything you need ready before you go out to take the cuttings. So I've got compost, which is very free draining. I've added grit and I've added perlite. I've got pots, I've got labels, I've got a sharp knife, absolutely essential. So now I can go ahead. So we will put compost in there. And I've got a deep pot because some of these are quite long. I've got my glasses, essential. Take one out at a time. And the first thing to do is to remove some leaves, because the leaves are transpiring, which means that they're losing moisture, and that is what will kill the plant. Now the end here, it wants to be cut below a node. That's where a leaf comes from. So just below that is where the roots are most likely to form. And put it in the corner of the pot. One, because it dries out less quickly, because the plastic is holding the moisture, and two, because the outside is warmer and you need warmth for the roots to grow. Let's take another one. Now, I would stress that there is absolutely nothing that I'm doing now that is essential to make this cutting strike. But all I'm trying to do is to maximize the opportunity of success. Now, this can go on a windowsill, but it does need to be kept moist. So the best way to do that in those circumstances is to water it first and let the water drain out, and then put a clear polythene bag over the top and fasten it. And as the leaves transpire, the water will condense against the polythene of the bag and keep that air moist, and that's really important. You know that roots are forming when you see new growth. Now, that may not be this winter, so be patient, maybe next spring. Once they've formed, they don't need any protection. They can go outside. This is completely hardy. And then round about next April or so, these can be divided up, potted on individually, or even planted out into a nursery bed, grown on until they're large enough to plant in the garden. Now, we're off to visit a plantsman's garden that is still looking superb deep into autumn.
Having a garden that looks good in autumn, I think, is really useful because so many people have very little colour. Here, it's just evolved in a way that it's become so good in autumn. I've always wanted a fully flowery garden through the year, but just to have this great flush of flowers now is a real plus. I'm John Grimshaw. I'm a botanist and gardener, an editor and writer, and this is my garden here in North Yorkshire. The whole plot is less than 1/5 of an acre, and I would describe the garden as being a sort of plantsman's cottage garden. The ethos of this garden is to be as colourful as possible, for as long as possible. Any bright bit of colour is really valuable, and in winter, even a tiny spot of colour is welcome, whereas now and through the summer, you can have this great mass of show and brightness through the season. I think that's really uplifting and, well, a great stimulus to life, really. So this is Symphyatrecum, formerly known as Aster Little Carlo, and I think it's one of the very best autumn Michaelmas daisies that there is. I really would not want to be without this fantastic crop of soft bluey mauve flowers in enormous abundance for weeks. It's a full head of flowers, so each stem has a great mass of flowers. Look at that one, for example. It's just a great wodge of flowers on the top of here. Just a really first-class garden plant. The North Sea is about 20-some miles to the east of here, and so the coastal wind comes over the top of the wolds and blows the garden about quite savagely. And also I have no glasshouse here, so I've really got to focus on the hardiest plants. I also expect them to stay stocky because they develop some resistance. There are exceptions, but on the whole they stand quite stiff because they're exposed to sun and wind a lot. One of the great advantages of this garden is the light. The plants catch the light in different ways, and the sun catches them. They sort of shimmer and waft about, and I absolutely love that. When you get that bit of movement, it becomes completely magical. It's the most beautiful thing I can think of. I think this is a really nice combination for autumn, but it's actually been excellent long season interest as well. The plant in front of me with the sort of autumn colours developing is Aruncus horatio, which is one of my top 10 perennials. Comes up in spring with fine foliage, flowers with little white flowers on these shoots in May or June or so. And then the colour develops for autumn, they'll drop and the stems stand up and look great all winter. The same is the case with this Miscanthus, Yakushima dwarf, which reaches its flowering peak now, matching very well with these stems. And this Solidago, called Dennis Strange, a golden rod, adds so nicely to the grass and to the Aruncus. It's a really lovely little trio, and I like planting things in trios that have maximum interest for as long as possible.
I am Susan Grimshaw. I'm John's mother. His love of plants possibly has some origins in my own love of plants, and I'm very glad to have been able to pass on this love to him. John was not a particularly quiet baby, so I used to take him out in the pram, and as we were walking along around South Sheffield, I would be pointing things out to him. You know, I can remember telling him, oh, look at all those violets, John, when he was about 6 months old, you know. So, yes, I was telling him about flowers all his life, really.
We need to deadhead these things, Ma.
Oh, yes.
This is a lovely variegated pelargonium called Cape Town.
Cape Town?
Yes,
That's
it's
nice.
beautiful foliage, isn't it?
Yes, it's beautiful and a lovely contrast with the colour of the flowers.
I couldn't possibly imagine life without plants and gardening. I think Mother just inculcated it into me that this was interesting and really never looked back. I can name most British wildflowers without having a clue about cars. My interest is really in African plants, but there's not many I can grow from East Africa, which was where I did my research and lived for some years. So my interest has migrated further south to the South African species that are, so many cases, completely hardy. In front of me is this wonderful red hot poker, Chenopopia coalescens. And I just love it. It's one of my favourite plants, super foliage, it's bluish colour, and then in October it erupts like this. It's just starting now into this mass of fabulous orange pokers. So this is from the Drakensberg Mountains of South Africa, where it grows in enormous sheets. I've seen great orange fields full of this in the wild. This is the lovely Erigeron annuus, a little annual or biennial flower. I have lots of this in the garden because it just self-sows, puts itself around. If I have too much, I weed it out, and it's such a dainty, elegant, airy sort of flower. And a spot of contrast is always good. This is a real favourite of mine. It's a little rowan, a white-berried rowan from China, Sorbus frutescens. And I think as a small shrub for any garden, this is ideal. It never gets to maybe more than, say, 2 metres, 7 feet or so. In 20, 25 years, you could easily shorten it if you needed to. But it does this every single year. Huge bunches of really quite large, luscious white berries, which really fit in, to my mind, with all the rest of the autumn show around us. These euphorbia leaves and things here. I think it looks really fantastic amongst that display. It's just a jolly handy small shrub. I'm a plantsman through and through. I couldn't imagine life without gardening. The feeling of actually accomplishing something, I can't draw or paint or anything like that, so this is my artistic creation, really. I really love colour in the garden. I think it's so important for cheering everybody up when most people's gardens are going off and looking a bit sad. I want it as long as possible, and why not?
I think the point that John made about gardens being his art is a really good one, and that they are places where we can express our creativity, and gardens can be, and perhaps should be, a form of art, and we should celebrate that. Now, on a purely practical level, the fruit this year has been outstanding. Best I can ever remember it in the 34 years we've been here. And nothing has been better than the figs. They have given us hundreds of ripe figs. They're all brown turkey, all delicious. We've been picking them since July. We've had jam, we've had them cooked, we've had them raw. But if you don't have any ripe figs by now, they will not ripen, because the tree has produced these to ripen in the new year, in January, February and March. And of course they won't do that here. They will in Turkey and Greece and southern Spain and northern Africa, but not in the British Isles. Next year's figs are tiny, and that you will see on the new growth in between the stem and the leaf. And that's what you want to look after. However, all these green figs are making demands on the tree. So conventional wisdom is that you take them all off, and that leaves a tree to put all its energy into next year's fruit. However, you may not have a fig, in which case, here are jobs for you this weekend. If you sow some pea seeds now, it'll give you a crop next June or even in late May. Choose an early variety like these, which are meteor. Use deep plugs or pots, as they need room for the roots to grow. I'm putting 2 pea seeds in each plug, pressing them into the compost and then covering them over. Put them somewhere warm to germinate and water them well. When the seedlings emerge, they can be stored in a cold frame and planted out in late winter or early spring when the ground is ready. At this time of year, brick and stone paths can get dangerously slippery. The most effective way of dealing with this is the simplest. Get some sharp sand that is truly abrasive, sprinkle it on the surface of the path, and then brush vigorously with a stiff, bristled broom. This is quite hard work, but it's effective and lasts for 2 or 3 weeks. Don't leave the best apples on the tree, and these tend to be highest up. Pick them carefully. Take them in your hand and lift them, and they should come away if they're ripe. And then put, rather than throw them, into a basket. Store them in a cool, dark place, and they will be delicious for months to come. A lot of what we've done today, in fact, almost all of it, is either preparing for the future, making next year as good as possible, or things that we can spread out across the winter months. But it's worth just stopping and taking note of what is happening here and now. Because autumn is one of the loveliest times of the year. And when the light is right, everything shines, everything glows. From the apples that are remaining on the trees to the leaves as they're turning. And because it's so brief, and because we know that there may be another 2 days before we get that magical light again, then it's doubly precious. And it's worth just stopping everything, stop thinking about next spring, stop planning what jobs to do on a dark, wet January day, and just saying, I am here now, and it's wonderful. And I'm afraid that's it for today. Francis will be with you next week, but I'll see you back here at Longmeadow in a couple of weeks' time. So until then, bye-bye.